Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Deal, the show where we go deeper than the numbers and we talk about what leads to success in life and business. Now, today on the show, my guest is Jacob Hernandez, and I am extremely excited for this episode. I'm going to tell you why. Jacob actually changed my life. I was speaking at a conference about 7 or 8 months ago on capital raising, and after the conference, he came up to me and he asked me if I coached capital raising. And until that very moment, I had never even considered it. Well, lo and behold, 7, 8 months later, I now have a bunch of students. And in fact, Jacob was my very first one. And within 3 to 4 months of coaching with me, he had over $600,000 in commitments for investors. Now, all that goes to show that you need to go up to people, you need to go to conferences, you need to have the conversation because one conversation can easily change your life. Today's episode, because I know his story so well, we really get into it. It's pretty much 30 minutes of absolute knowledge after knowledge after knowledge after knowledge. So just strap up, buckle up, because you're going to enjoy it. Let's get right into it. All right, Mr. Jacob Hernandez, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. I mean, we've become buddies over the course of the last year or so. I know a lot of your stories. I'm very eager to share it with my audience. Now, for my audience who doesn't know anything about you, can you tell us what are you doing right now? And then afterward, we'll talk about how you got there.
Yeah, so right now I'm scaling commercial real estate. I went from Airbnb single family homes to now looking into the boutique hotel space.
Okay, so boutique hotels. Sounds trendy, sounds intimidating. What does it mean? Does that translate to the world of maybe your average person who knows how an Airbnb works? How do you get that into a boutique hotel?
Yeah, basically in a nutshell, I like to call them commercial Airbnbs, and all it is just an asset that has the economies of scale, but it's not your flag hotel. So when you think about a commercial Airbnb or a boutique hotel, you're thinking anywhere between like 5 doors to 50 doors. I like to go a little bit bigger. I'm looking for properties that can cash flow at least $700,000, but my ideal point is at least $1 million. That way it makes sense to go to commercial. If not, you would just stay doing single family homes. So the reason I went into commercial Airbnbs or boutique hotels was I was looking for something that was more scalable, something that had the economies of scale, and that I could set an on-site team to handle it for me. Because when you have single family home, you're basically buying a job. You need to be managing those. You don't have the economies of scale to go into other markets. So you need to keep buying properties in the same code so that you can have maybe a property manager that can be going on site. Now, the good thing with boutique hotels is it gives you the freedom to now hire and have an on-site team. Now, these are also not run like your regular hotel. So you might not have all of the staff. You might choose to do self-check-in and just run it kind of like an Airbnb. So you're saving a lot of those expenses and just having a higher profit margin.
So you threw out a lot of numbers there. You threw out some words, economies of scale for our listeners who aren't aware. I mean, this is exactly the reason that I'm in multifamily and not single family anymore. It's the exact same difference between buying a house and going into an apartment complex. Whereas instead of buying an Airbnb, now you're buying a smaller hotel, but you get a lot of benefits by going bigger. You can hire staff, you can have on-site maintenance, you can do all these things versus having to send a handyman from this place to that place to this place to that place. It just makes so much more sense once you get big enough. Now, you mentioned 700 to $1 million. What kind of profit margin are we looking at when we're looking for a boutique hotel?
Yeah, so anywhere between 30 to 50%, depending on how you're managing it. And it's all going to depend on your fixed expenses. So property taxes and insurance are going to play a big role in your profit margin, and those are fixed. So we were looking at a property in Cape Cod, and insurance was almost 20% of the margin. So naturally in that market, you're going to see lower profit margins closer to 30% instead of 50. But that's like the healthy range, anywhere between 30 to 50 on the net operating income. And then of course you have your mortgage and your leverage, and you get to a free cash flow. So it just depends on how much leverage you get on that asset, but that's a good baseline to work out based on.
Got it. And as we've spoken about this before, I know there are some other major considerations for a boutique hotel. Like you might have businesses attached, things like
Correct.
restaurants, things like gift shops, wedding venues. How do you take all that into consideration? Is it just a bonus, or is it something else that affects the bottom line as far as operations and staff? What do you do when you're looking at these kinds of opportunities?
No, so it definitely does. And we like to do a sensitivity analysis for all of our deals. We're looking at rooms revenue first as the base and making sure that the property is going to be able to cash flow enough so that we can return investor capital. So the first thing we're looking at, does this cash flow the hotel on itself? And then everything else is just the gravy on top. We'll look at weddings. So typically you can charge anywhere between 3 to 10K a wedding, and that's goes directly to your bottom line. So if you're doing 10 weddings a year at 10 grand, well, that's 100K extra to your NOI. And at a 10% cap rate, that's adding $1 million more into the value of your property. So that's when this really starts getting interesting, is when you're adding all these ancillary revenue. Maybe you have food and beverage. Maybe you have so much things you can do, corporate events, corporate retreats, and all this is directly into your bottom line. Another thing that you can do if the market permits it is you add a resort fee, and even just $20 per stay, you can add 60 to 100K more as well in revenue. And that's also directly to your bottom line. So there's ways to just increase and force appreciation of these assets, which is something that you can't do in residential. And comparing the residential to the commercial space is that your value is tied to your income because it's a business. In residential, even if your property is cash flowing $1 million, well, you're always going to be tied to the comparable properties in the market.
Yeah, okay. I love that, and we have to get into that for a second. I teach this stuff all the time, but for our listeners who don't know, right, the difference between residential and commercial real estate is a cap rate based valuation, or a NOI based valuation, versus comps. Comps being your neighbor down the street sells his house. Guess what? Now your house is compared to that house, right? But can you explain for our audience how a cap rate based or an NOI based valuation would work on something like that?
Yeah, basically what it means is that when a bank or an investor comes in to either refinance your property or buy you out of your asset, the first thing they're going to look at is what's your net operating income. That means what was your revenue minus your expenses, and that's your NOI. Now, they're going to look at that number, and we're going to look at what the cap rate for that market is. Now, the cap rate is going to be anywhere between 5 in places like Florida, all the way up to like 15 or 16 in other places where there's not so much demand. The cap rate just comes from how much demand and how much the cap rate has compressed from the different markets. So of course, Florida, California rates are very low. You're going to be getting those like 7, 6, 5%. But just an easy example, if you buy a property and it's doing $100,000 in NOI, that property is going to be worth $1 million if it's a 10% cap rate. So you take the NOI divided by the cap rate. So 100,000 divided by 10, that's $1 million. And that's how you value commercial real estate versus residential, where the bank will come in or an investor is going to come in. They're going to look at your neighbor's houses. They're going to look at what's close by, what that property next door sold for. And that ties your valuation. And they're not looking at your income at all because they don't consider single family homes a business.
Got it. So I love this talk about single family because I want to talk about how you got to where you are. So you quite literally wrote the book on Airbnb. So for our listeners who haven't checked it out, go get his book. It's awesome. I've read it myself. But why don't you tell us, your beginning? So I know before Airbnb, even you did some things with Amazon. So tell us how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I was a freshman in college, and I've always had a passion for just living a life by design. So I knew I didn't want to go out into the corporate world. I wanted to be able to not be tied to anywhere geographically. I wanted to have freedom of time and location. And that's when I started searching for business ideas. And summer, I had the opportunity to fly to China to do an internship, and it was actually an e-commerce company. So I was really excited when the opportunity came. Flew out there, and I was going to spend, I think, like a month and a half or two in China, in Shanghai. And when I got there the first week, these guys were just making me serve their coffee. And I didn't fly all the way across the world, got food poisoning the first week, ended up in the hospital. Then I just go through all of this, flew 20 hours to serve somebody's coffee. So once again, my entrepreneurial, I guess you can call it bug, had me quit. These people told me, like, we're going to take away your visa. So I was scared. I'm like, I'm in China. I've got no visa. I fly out to Hong Kong, get a new visa. And then I had all this time now because I had the apartment paid for in Shanghai. I had all this time now that I didn't know what to do. So I started traveling all around China. I was taking a train to Yiwu Marketplace. I was going everywhere. And anyways, long story short, I met a lot of suppliers, and I get back to Florida to continue college. And at that point, I started going to e-commerce meetups, trying to learn the ropes, trying to just do some business. And I knew I wanted to do business with China because I had seen just how they manufacture absolutely everything in the world. So did some data analysis and found this niche selling wedding gifts. And I became Mr. and Mrs. Everything. I was selling Mr. and Mrs. coffee mugs, cheese boards, cutting boards, wine glasses, you name it. I was adding a Mr. and Mrs. and selling that. So that was my start of business. I grew that to multiple seven figures and ended up having an exit. So from there, I started looking at what other business ventures can I apply the digital marketing skills, design. I have a passion for just making cool stuff. And at the same time, I wanted to leverage all the skills that I honed. And I found out that Airbnb works pretty much just like the Amazon A9 algorithm, where you can actually launch, rank your properties, and stand out from your competitors. So that's how I got into Airbnbs, and we immediately started crushing it with the same tools and the same marketing principles that we had used during our Amazon days. So we were launching these properties just like you would a product. We were using influencers. So we had influencers staying at our Airbnbs, and they were sending traffic through a special URL to add the property to their wish list. They were asking their audience to go and like the property. And if you think about Airbnb, it works just like social media. If there's a post on Instagram that starts trending, it's because people are liking it and commenting. Well, the Airbnb algorithm is the same. If there's a lot of traffic and a lot of likes, which are called wish lists on Airbnb, your property is going to rank higher in the algorithm. So we found all these different ways to game the algorithm. We were tracking all of our metrics, conversion rate, click-through rate. We were split testing our main image. And all of this made it so that we were absolutely crushing everybody else on Airbnb. Our occupancy were 95% all year round, and we were charging $1,000 or more every single night at all of our properties. Now that ended up catching the attention of a private equity fund, and we ended up doing a joint venture with them, scaling a large portfolio, and eventually had another with them. And that was 7 months ago. So at that point, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do next? But I still want to keep using my same skills. So if you look at my progression, it's always been like building the same building blocks. I'm not going from like Airbnbs now to multifamily. I'm not going from Airbnbs now to like industrial or self-storage. I'm going from something that's very similar, just at a bigger scale, where I can now use the same principles to rank on Google. Now, a lot of these motels that we're converting into boutique hotels, they have no online presence. They have no digital marketing. They have no revenue management. And all these skills that I built from my Amazon day into my Airbnb days, now into boutique hotels, they're the same exact skills that I'm transferring over, and just each time trying to do it a little bit bigger.
You actually just answered the question I was just about to ask you, which I love that, right? You know, we're on the same thought plane here, but yeah, you took these skills that you learned in a completely separate line of business and completely transferred them over to what you're doing. And you basically just added scale every time. I mean, so let's go back a little bit. You know that the Amazon days weren't all smooth sailing, and I want to yeah, because on this podcast, we go beyond the deal. We try to get into the things, the deeper things, the struggles, the little things that make the difference in the life of an entrepreneur. So talk to me about why you ended up choosing to leave Amazon and get into Airbnb in the first place.
Absolutely. And I try to skim through the story because I was trying to give it in a timeline progression. And I'm always very optimistic. But when you do look back at all the challenges, and of course, it hasn't been as perfect and as smooth as the story is. And back in the Amazon days, I had multiple suppliers, actually my own suppliers, copying my product, so that any best-selling product in China, really, there's no ethics. It's all just business as usual. So if they saw that I was having or shipping multiple containers a year, they would immediately rip apart my product and just ship it directly to Amazon and sell at a fraction of the cost. So I faced a lot of challenges with those because I always had to be innovating. I had to keep finding new suppliers to try and protect my products. I had to try and keep launching new products because the product life cycle on Amazon, it's so quick. Like you start doing really well, people catch on to it. There's all these softwares, people are tracking what's selling, and immediately the market gets saturated. And that's what Amazon ultimately wants. And that's why they have this open marketplaces, because they want to give the product to the customer at the cheapest possible price. So price compression is a thing, margin compression is a thing. And I started getting into lots of debt just to try and stay afloat, to launch new products. I actually took out multiple credit cards to pay some debt and I was using one to pay the other, to pay the other, to pay the other, until I eventually was able to sell. Because the problem with product-based businesses is growth sucks cash. So when you're growing more, you always need more capital, because the cash flow conversion cycle in product-based business are so long. So you're ordering a product from China. It takes 40 to 60 days to manufacture. Then it takes 60 days to get it by boat. Amazon takes 15 to 20 days to process your inventory. So from the moment you order and you're actually putting money and deposits from your own money into a product, it might be 200 to 300 deals before you actually see your money back. But if you're selling and you're growing, you need more cash. Where's all that cash coming from? It's coming from debt, credit cards, and different lines of credits. And most of the Amazon sellers I know have these huge lines of credit because they're needing to pay for inventory in advance. So that's the biggest problem with product-based businesses. And that's the reason I sold, that I wanted to be in a business that was more tangible, right? People are always going to need a place to live. So I knew that even if I bought a house and something happened, like say my Airbnb account got shut down, which on Amazon, it's very common. You can get suspended like this. They turn off your lights and now you have all this debt, no Amazon account, and no avenue to sell these products. Where else are you going to sell all this, right? You're stuck with 1,000, 3,000, 10,000 Mr. and Mrs. cheese boards. Like, what do you do with that, right? So it puts you in a bad position as a seller. But when you have a real estate business, you can live in the house, you can medium-term rent it, long-term rent it, sell it, and you're going to have buyers because people are always going to need a place to sleep. So that's the reason I fell in love with real estate. And I've loved it ever since, because you're able to just add value. I can still add all the same skills, but I have a hard asset. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't ever do base businesses again, but if I did, I have learned a lot and I would do stuff that I can protect. I would probably do stuff I can manufacture in the States, and I would just do things differently. So big learning lesson there. And now going into commercial real estate, I still love single families and I would still own a couple homes for cash flow. I'm not saying they're bad. There's just different levels to all this stuff. And I guess if you're building a portfolio, it's always good to have a mix of residential and commercial.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I know on this channel, we often talk about multifamily and the benefits of commercial and all this kind of stuff, but that does not mean that you can't make a lot of money doing residential real estate, even still today, being a house flipper, being a long-term buy and hold, being short-term rental Airbnb person. Everybody has their niche, even wholesalers. Probably some of the wealthiest people I've ever met have been wholesalers.
Yep.
That's business, right? Yeah. Hey, really quick, I hope you're enjoying this episode. I just wanted to stop for a second and thank our sponsor, which is me. Nimble Capital Group is my boutique investment firm where we help passive investors access deals built for cash flow, equity growth, and powerful tax benefits. And if you think you've ever wanted to learn how to raise capital and become a GP yourself, I coach a select group of students each month, most of whom will raise over $500,000 within their first 60 days. So check the show notes in the description below to book a call. I'll see you there. But let's go back. So you are dealing with the stress of basically lines of credit, using one credit card to pay for another credit card, to pay for another credit card, to order products, and then your suppliers are undercutting you. How are you managing stress all this time? And by the way, what are you, like 25 when all this is happening? Maybe less?
Yeah.
Right? So how are you managing all that stress, and how did you find a way out of it?
Yeah. At first you start panicking. That's like probably the normal human reaction is you're panicking.
Yeah,
You
you're
don't know, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to pay my employees? You're around all these $1 million sellers at all these conferences, because I was part of a $1 million seller group, just like there's like a real estate conference and a real estate mastermind, and you're hanging out around all these sellers. Everybody's selling millions, but they're all in the same position. You think you're a millionaire on paper, but when you look at your bank account, there's really nothing. So during those times, again, the first just freaking out. I think one night I couldn't sleep and I was just talking to my girlfriend. But what I did from there was I had read tons of books up to this point on focus on expanse. If I kept focusing on what was going wrong and the debt that I had, instead of I could do or focus on the abundance and focus on the other side, I knew it would only get worse. So I started meditating even more. I started visualizing even more. I kind of like detached from the issues. I started trusting that everything was going to be okay. I kid you not, like immediate, like 2 or 3 months after I start doing this process and letting go, a buyer shows up, like stuff just started going in place. Like I was able to sell the company, pay off all the debt, walk away with money. It just ended up like working out. And I think it was due to me not focusing on or not continue panicking. Like I'm a huge believer in the law of attraction. That for me is like, whenever something's going wrong, I try to focus on the good stuff and try and do whatever possible I can to control. And if I can't really do much, then let it go.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what this show is all about, folks. Like, this is the real meat and potatoes of entrepreneurship. This is the real meat and potatoes of success, right? It's the little things that happen behind the scenes. It's those mindset shifts of when you need to focus on getting through the storm, because there's always going to be a storm. There's always going to be bad stuff happening. Almost cursed there, caught myself. And, it's these mindset shifts. Now, all of the absolute most successful people I know, including you, including myself, are spiritual in some way. And I don't ever talk about religion on this show. And I don't want to. I don't want to preach any one particular set of faith or beliefs. But all of the most successful people I know at some point say, I gave it over and I started believing that everything was going to be okay. I started manifesting the things that I needed to. And sometimes that's really what it is. It's the power of belief, power of spirituality, is the power of manifestation to get you through the times when you can't see out the other side. So I absolutely love all of that. Thank you for sharing that story. Now, take us to the present day. What was the moment that you decided I'm going to do a boutique hotel after I'm sold off my entire portfolio of Airbnb?
Yeah, so I sold off and I gave myself some time, like the first 30 days to just figure out what I wanted to do. When I was looking around, I started looking at business acquisitions, took a course on that. So basically the first thing I do whenever I want to start a venture is go all in into education. And that's how we met. I'll go into that afterwards, but I literally find the best masterminds. I find who the people that know their stuff are in that niche, and I start following all their content, looking at watching YouTube videos and just immersing myself into that. So I started looking at buying businesses with this SBA program, seller finance them, doing mergers and acquisitions, doing roll-ups, and then selling those. And that was one of the things I wanted to focus my attention on until I landed on this YouTube video of this guy. His name's Blake Daly, and he was doing videos. He's now a really good friend of mine, but he was doing videos on exactly this, how he went from Airbnbs into commercial Airbnbs, aka boutique hotels. And immediately I'm like, okay, this is just what I was looking for. I need to change niches. I don't need to go and learn something new. And I can still apply my skills, because for business acquisitions, I was going to do it the exact same. I was going to buy businesses that didn't have online presence, boring businesses, and then doing ads, doing funnels, setting up a really good website, and applying the skills that I was good at into those business ventures. But when I stumbled upon boutique hotels, it just make a lot more sense. And again, I paid for a 25K membership for just boutique hotels from this guy that I found on YouTube, Blake. I then started attending all these conferences on capital raising. That's how I met you. And I always do this for every single venture. I've learned that that's the quickest path to success, is to like hang around the people that have already done it, invest in education, and just immerse yourself in one thing and focus your attention on that.
Got it. Yeah, I could not agree more, word for word. That is exactly what I tell people to do. If you really want to get into any of these industries, whether it's multifamily or boutique hotels or even buying and selling businesses, there is so much opportunity out there for education. There's so many ways to hang around with and network with people who've actually been there, done that, and you can learn from them. And some of them are going to cost you money. Some of them are going to be, paid mentorship. Some of them is paid conferences, but it's worth every penny that you can invest in yourself and in your education if you want to get to the other side. If you want to get to where they have been, you have to hang out and learn from those people. And sometimes there's ways to do it for no money too, but usually the faster way is to pay a little bit of money to get where you're trying to go.
But when I first started the Amazon days, I had no money. So I started with meetup.com, and that's how I met one of my mentors, who became one of my best friends as well. I usually end up just becoming friends with these people as well. At the end, like everybody's human and everybody wants to like help others out as well. If like they see somebody that's hungry, that wants it. And I got to an Amazon meetup and it was a free meetup. Again, nothing here was paid. And we were in a round table and I was the only one with a notebook and a bunch of questions. And I start firing questions, taking down notes. And this guy who was only like 4 or 5 years older than me, he was already selling, I think, 100K a month. And for me, that was incredible. He was about to quit his 9 to 5 and now he's an 8-figure seller, but he started showing me the ropes. He became one of my best friends. And to this day, he's one of my best friends. And this was not paid for. Now, when you do have more access to capital, then it's quicker to just go and pay. But when you're starting out, that also shouldn't be a limitation or an excuse because you can also get this information for free.
Absolutely. And you just led on to like a very, very, very little niche secret in this industry, which is that even if it's just a little bit older guys love to impart their knowledge onto younger guys who remind them of their younger selves, right? It just happens. So if you're a younger guy out there, and actually I know that this translates to women as well. So if you're a younger man or woman and you want to go out and learn how to do something, find a slightly older than you person who is already successful in this industry and show them how hungry you are. And I promise you, you will get a ton of value out of it. It's happened to me multiple times. I've done it to other people multiple times, and it's happened to you too, right?
Yep. And all you need is a little bit better. Like your first mentor can be that person that is selling 3K a month on whatever that venture is. And like, that's your first mentor. And then once you're selling 10K, now you find whoever's selling 50. And once you're selling 50, you find whoever's doing 100. And once you're doing 100, you find whoever's doing 1 million. You don't immediately need to go to that mentor that's doing 20 million. You can go to that. There's always like these small mentors that can help you on that journey that are just a little bit further in that journey than you.
Yeah. So we are arriving at the end of the show, but before I let you go, there is one question that I ask all of our guests. I'm a big believer in personal routines, morning routines, nighttime routines, physical and mental health. So what are you doing these days to manage your stress, to stay healthy, to stay the sharpest version of yourself that you need to be able to perform at this level?
Yeah, absolutely. First is sleep. So I try and always go to sleep around the same time, no later than 10. Then every single morning when I wake up, try not to touch my phone at all. I know it's really hard, so I started adding like that time blocker on the phone. Not touch the phone. I usually wake up with no alarm clock, so I let my body tell me when I need to wake up. And as soon as I stand up, I grab a coffee. I'm using this mushroom coffee now, and I'm going to my balcony, sit down in the same chair, and that's my morning routine. That's when it starts. I drinking my coffee, I have a journal with me, and I start writing the things I'm grateful for. So I put grateful, and I make a list of all the stuff I'm grateful for. I then write what I'm grateful for that I don't yet have that I want to have, but I'm writing it like I already have it. So I'm grateful for X, and those are my goals. So I'm not talking about my goals like there's something in the future or away from me. I'm actually writing them like they already happen, and I'm being grateful for it. I'm feeling the emotion because that's one of the biggest thing about manifesting is you need to feel it. It's not just words. It's the feeling that you attach to those words and actually feeling and embodying that. So what I'm grateful for, great gratitude for the intention that I have. And then I write down what are 3 to 5 things I can get done today in order to reach those goals that I have. And that sets my agenda for today. If I'm feeling any stress or thoughts, I write them all out because it helps clear my mind. So for me, like journaling's been huge. I also allocate time for thinking time during the week, and that's been a game changer for me. But then after that journal, I close the journal out and I'll do a 5 to 10 minute meditation, breathing exercises, some visualization, and then I'll start my day. And I think that's key. Like it might take you 30, 40 minutes in the morning, but you shouldn't start your day fighting fires. Like you should not just grab your phone and start answering emails as soon as you wake up. That's probably the worst way you can possibly do things.
That is gold. Absolute gold. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Tell the listeners, where can they find out more about you?
Yeah, they can just search me up on Instagram. It's Jacob with an O at the end. So in Spanish, it would be Jacobo, but Jacob with an O at the end, Hernandez. You'll see me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn. But yeah, connect with me on social, DM me, whatever.
All right.
Hey, thanks, Michael.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Beyond the Deal. I hope you got some valuable insights that you can apply to your own investing journey. Now, If you've enjoyed this conversation, do me a favor, hit that follow button, leave a review, and share this episode with somebody who you think could benefit from it. It really helps the show grow and bring on even more incredible guests. If you want to go deeper, make sure to follow me on your socials. You can find the links in the show notes in the description below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time. Until then, keep going beyond the deal.